flu is on the move. The virus has arrived in yet another province.
They're concerned about any health problem that's on the mainland. It's not going to stay there.
Showing the vaccine only thought to be 10% effective.
Nationwide, there are already more than 41,000 cases confirmed. Every state in the country reporting widespread flu activity.
As of this morning, 18 countries around the world have reported cases of the flu within their borders.
Numbers out of Australia as of mid-October are concerning. If you get sick, stay home.
Small Fry by Lisa Brennan-Jobs. Initially, when I saw this book was coming out, I was actually really excited. I figured it would be a good companion novel for Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, seeing as how Lisa was heavily featured in that book, both with the naming of that computer that he had designed and just a simple drama that surrounded him and her existence, how it was inconvenient for him. One thing about highly successful people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Tesla, Benjamin Franklin, basically anyone in history who's been very successful with business, they all have a very certain personality type. They're all very passionate people. Very few of them are actually very good with the people around them or treat them well. It's kind of a personality trait that goes hand in hand with geniuses. They just don't think the same. But often they also destroy relationships around them. A good example of that would have been Howard Hughes. Obviously, Steve Jobs wasn't in Howard Hughes' category of crazy, but he definitely was manic depressant and very self-destructive. So I figured it'd be good to get another perspective on him with this book. And to be clear, I think it'd be a little unfair to compare this one to like Walter Isaacson's book. But having read Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, it's hard not to notice all the similarities. Obviously, it's the same person that's heavily featured, being Steve Jobs. But it's kind of funny to note that all the personality flaws and characteristics of him are consistent all the way through into her book. But if you really boil down the story, it's really about a girl trying to seek recognition from her father, constantly trying to chase his approval, ultimately having massive daddy issues all through the entire book. Which is a little funny because Steve Jobs was kind of like that also, always constantly wondering what his parents were like, and it just transferred right down to his daughter. So about halfway through the book, I started thinking to myself, why in the heck did I buy the book? It's not a good story. It's not a happy story. It's about a guy who was totally mean to his family, and his ex-girlfriend, who he happened to have a daughter with, and a completely dysfunctional family. As a matter of fact, her relationship with her mom wasn't exactly good either. Her mom seemed very unstable, which is probably why Steve Jobs wanted nothing to do with her. So why did I get the book? Not really entertained by stuff like that. If I want to be around dysfunctional people, I'll go hang out with my own family. As the story progresses, I almost noticed a sense of entitlement with the characters in the story, just because they're related to Steve Jobs. Would I have bought the book if her last name wasn't Jobs? Probably not. But it does add another dimension to, like I said, Walter Isaacson's. And you sometimes tend to forget that these are real people, real struggles. But ultimately, it sounds like Steve Jobs basically made another copy of himself. Just very unhappy, miserable people, demanding that he buy them houses and everything else. Almost to the point where the book sounded like a whole book ranting about how horrible of a person he was, even though he did eventually pay for her Harvard tuition and eventually bought her mom a house. How many people do that? Yeah, he's probably a real prick, but I'm sure there's some perks being related to a multi-millionaire, billionaire. That being said, writing a book like this, I'm sure it must have been very hard for her. It seems like a lot of it she was very honest in. For example, the weirdos her mom had exposed to her early on in her life. Like, for example, the hippie family that liked to have people over and swim naked, and that weird nursing incident. So ultimately, I think it must have taken guts for her to write this book. I also realize that I'm probably not the target audience. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hard, but it's hard not to notice that her mom also wrote a book on her life with Steve Jobs. And basically, from what I can tell, reading the synopsis, it's another book on another victim of Steve Jobs. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will talk to you next time.